7 minutes before he was supposed to walk down the aisle, Travis Irvine's phone rang. He almost ignored it. His jacket was perfectly pressed. His bow tie sat at the exact angle his stylist had approved. 300 guests were settling into white draped chairs outside, and Senator Harold Carver himself had just sent word that he was ready to escort his daughter down the aisle. Everything was in its proper place. Every piece of the future Travis had spent 34 years engineering was finally clicking into position. Then he saw the name on the screen. Kathryn. His thumb hovered over the glass. He hadn't heard from her in nearly 8 months. Not since a 2-line text that had closed the door on the most honest relationship he had ever allowed himself to have. He should have let it ring. He answered on the second buzz. Travis. Her voice was low and strained, like someone trying to speak through a weight pressing down on her chest. It's time. The babies are coming right now. The world outside the window continued as if nothing had happened. A string quartet played somewhere in the garden. A caterer rushed past with a silver tray. But inside the suite, everything had gone completely still. That's not possible, he said. You told me it was over. That you had handled it. I lied. No apology. No softening. Just the raw, breathing truth. After what you said to me, after how quickly you looked away from everything we were, I couldn't let you take this from me too. Travis said nothing. He moved to the window and looked out at the manicured grounds of the Harrington estate. Below him, 300 people had come to watch him marry Cecile Carver, daughter of a sitting senator and the most strategically perfect woman he had ever dated. In 45 minutes, he would have everything his blueprint required. Where are you? The question left his mouth before his mind had approved it. Greenfield Medical, but Travis, I'm not asking you to come. 20 minutes, he said. Don't move. He set the phone down on the marble counter. In the mirror, a man in a tuxedo stared back at him, and he barely recognized the face. Have you ever had a single moment snap every assumption you held about your own future? Have you ever stood inside a life you constructed down to the last detail and suddenly seen it for what it really was? Travis Irvine had. And he was standing in it right now. Travis Irvine had never once left his future to chance. He was born the only child of 2 Irish immigrants who settled in a small house outside Columbus, Ohio. His father, a man who had once designed roads back home, spent 15 years pouring concrete for a construction company that never once offered him a promotion. His mother cleaned hotel rooms 5 days a week and took on bookkeeping for local businesses on weekends. They gave everything so their son could have options they never did. Plan every step twice, Travis, his father told him every Sunday at breakfast. In this country, with enough discipline, you get to decide who you become. Travis had taken those words and built a life around them. By 16 he had mapped out a decade-by-decade arc, engineering degree at Northwestern, followed by a technology fellowship in California, then his own startup before 30. Marriage by 35 to someone who complemented his ambitions. A family that operated on schedule. Public service by 45. By 34, the company he founded at 27, a firm called Pinnacle Shield that specialized in AI-driven cybersecurity for government and financial institutions, had grown into a $3.6 billion operation. His face appeared on the covers of business publications. His name was used in technology policy debates at the federal level. He was exactly where he planned to be. Cecile Carver had entered his life at precisely the right moment, as if she, too, had been following a script written by the same careful hand. She was educated, poised, and connected to rooms Travis had not yet been able to enter on his own. Their courtship had been efficient. Their engagement, photographed aboard her father's sailing yacht at sunset, generated the kind of press that opened boardroom doors. A Vanity Fair spread called them a power couple reshaping Washington's future. It was perfect. It was completely hollow. But Travis had become very good at not noticing that. Then came Kathryn Mills. She was a corporate attorney specializing in international data law, brought in to advise Pinnacle Shield on its proposed expansion into European markets. Their first meeting, she had not been impressed. "Your approach to EU data sovereignty will get you fined and frozen out of 3 countries before you finish your first quarter," she had said, looking directly at him without blinking. "You're approaching this like a product launch, not like someone asking permission to enter someone else's home." No one spoke to him that way. He had been fascinated. What began as a consulting arrangement evolved into late-night strategy calls, then dinners that lasted until the restaurants closed, then 6 months of something Travis had never allowed himself before, a relationship that felt completely unscripted. Kathryn laughed without calculating the effect. She disagreed with him openly and without apology. She loved him in a way that asked nothing except that he show up honestly, which was, as it turned out, the one thing he had never practiced. He told himself it was temporary. A detour. He had a plan. Then she told him she was pregnant. They were in his penthouse on the 42nd floor. The city was glittering below them. Kathryn had been quiet all through dinner, and when she finally set down her fork and looked at him, her hands were still. "I'm pregnant, Travis. Twins." His response had come before he could shape it into anything thoughtful. "This isn't something I planned for, Kathryn. You know what my life looks like. You know what I'm building toward." She had nodded slowly. "I do know. I'm engaged. I have a 5-year expansion strategy in motion." He was already reaching for his phone. "I'll make arrangements. The best doctors. Complete privacy." Something shifted in her eyes then. Not rage. Not tears. Something quieter and more devastating. The look of someone watching a person reveal exactly who they are. "Don't," she said, picking up her bag. "I'll handle it myself." She left. He called for 2 weeks. She never answered. Then a text arrived. "It's been handled. Please don't reach out again." He had believed her because he needed to. And he had returned to his plan. Until 7 minutes before the wedding. The Harrington estate had been transformed into something that belonged in a magazine. 20,000 white roses. Quick pause. If you're loving these billionaire love stories, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Always remember that this channel continues to thrive because of the love you show. Thank you. Now, let's find out what happened in the remaining minutes of the story. Silk canopies over hand-cut crystal glassware. A chamber orchestra tucked into the garden's far corner. Senator Harold Carver moved through the arriving guests like a man who had been practicing this moment for years. Cecile stood in her bridal suite, a custom-designed ivory gown skimming the floor around her, bridesmaids orbiting her like quiet planets. Everything was in its place. In his suite across the estate, Travis Irvine removed his bow tie. A knock came, then his best man, Derek, pushed open the door with a grin that faded the instant he saw Travis's face. "They're ready for you." "Cecile looks absolutely stunning, man." Travis turned from the mirror. "I need you to deliver a message." Derek's grin died completely. "What kind of message?" "Tell Cecile, and her father, that I can't go through with this." Derek stared at him. He laughed once, short and airless, like he had been punched. "Travis, there are 300 people sitting outside. The governor is in the 3rd row. 2 senators. Half the cybersecurity industry flew in from the West Coast." "I know." Travis folded the tie and set it on the console table. "And I'm sorry for what this is going to cost everyone in that garden. But Kathryn Mills is in labor right now at Greenfield Medical. With my children." Derek sat down slowly on the edge of the chaise. He looked like a man who had just heard a language he didn't recognize. "Twins," Travis said, because Derek appeared to need more information to fully absorb the crash. Twin girls. She's been carrying them alone since I told her to handle it and turned away. And you believed she had. Travis ran a hand through his hair. I chose to believe it. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then, that doesn't sound like the Travis Irvine who runs background checks on his contractors before the first call. You triple read every clause. You don't take anything on faith in business. This wasn't business. Oh. Derek exhaled. It was a person you were in love with, which makes what you did worse, not better. Travis had no answer for that. He was already moving toward the door. Derek stood. Travis. At least talk to Cecile first. She deserves that. Travis paused with his hand on the knob. If she were about to have my children, 6 weeks early, in a hospital right now, would you stop to make sure the paperwork was in order? Derek said nothing. He had 2 daughters of his own. Tell them whatever explanation helps most, Travis said. A family emergency. A mental collapse. Or the truth, that I have been performing a version of my life for so long I almost handed it completely over to someone who deserved more than a performance. Then he walked out. The chaos that followed at the Harrington estate would be dissected in gossip columns for weeks. Senator Carver's face cycled through several colors that had no names when Derek delivered the news. He demanded security staff locate Travis and return him to the premises. Cecile, to her lasting credit, dismissed everyone from her bridal suite, removed her veil with steady hands, and made exactly 1 phone call, to her own attorney. She did not cry in front of anyone. Travis arrived at Greenfield Medical still in his tuxedo. He had pulled off the jacket in the car. The white dress shirt and pressed slacks were still unmistakably formal, and as he pushed through the labor and delivery doors, 2 nurses stopped to stare at him the way people stare at something that doesn't quite make sense. Kathryn Mills, he said at the desk. He said it with the same authority he used to open meetings, but the nurse at the station looked at him with considerably less deference. Are you family? I'm the father. A pause. A search of his face for either a lie or an emergency. Then, room 412. She's already delivered. He nearly stopped walking. He found her at the far end of the corridor. The room was quiet. The sharp antiseptic light of the hospital pressed down on everything. And there she was, Kathryn, sitting up in the hospital bed in a pale blue gown, her natural hair pulled back, her expression utterly composed in the way of someone who has survived something enormous and is still deciding how to feel about being intact. In the bassinet beside her, 2 small figures breathed in the slow underwater rhythm of the newly born. He stood in the doorway. She looked at him without surprise. The tuxedo registered on her face, a brief flicker of understanding, and then her expression returned to that careful stillness. You came, she said. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't accusation. Just a statement of fact that seemed to require adjustment. I should have come 8 months ago. She said nothing. He moved toward the bassinet slowly, the way he might approach something that could startle. 2 small girls, dark-haired and impossibly small, slept against each other. Something in his chest performed a maneuver he had no name for. What are their names? He asked. I haven't decided yet, she said. I wanted to meet them first. He reached out, then stopped himself. May I? Kathryn watched him for a moment. Then she nodded. He lifted the nearer of the 2 with the careful rigidity of someone who has never held a newborn before, adjusting his grip when she shifted her warm weight, finding a steadiness he hadn't known he possessed. The baby made no sound. She turned her face against his lapel and exhaled. He stood there for a very long time without speaking. Finally, he looked up. I owe you an apology that I'm not sure language is equipped for. Kathryn studied him. Her eyes moved over his face the way she used to read a contract, thoroughly, looking for what wasn't written. You left your wedding. I left a performance, he said. I've been performing for a very long time. A silence settled between them, broken only by the soft sounds of the hospital and the breathing of their daughters. What happens now? She asked. Travis didn't have an answer organized yet. For the first time in his life, he hadn't prepared one. The story broke before Travis reached the hospital parking garage. By the time he made it back to the lobby with Kathryn's discharge paperwork questions still swirling in his head, 3 news alerts had arrived on his phone, 2 from business publications and 1 from a gossip platform that had somehow already obtained a photograph of him walking across the Harrington estate grounds still in full tuxedo. Billionaire CEO walks out on wedding of the year. His publicist called 7 times before he answered. His CFO called once, which was more alarming. Derek texted, "It's bad. Senator Carver is nuclear. Pulling every string he has. Call me before you talk to anyone." But first, he had to deal with the board. The emergency call convened at 9 the following morning with 14 faces staring at him through the conference screen, all of them wearing variations of the same expression. The look of people calculating risk. Travis spoke first. "I understand everyone's concerns. I take full responsibility for the personal choices that created this situation. But Pinnacle Shield is not its CEO's love life. Our technology is the same technology it was 48 hours ago. Our contracts are the same contracts. Our team is the same team." "The market disagrees," said one board member flatly. "We've lost nearly $1 billion in market value since yesterday morning. The market is reacting emotionally." Travis kept his voice even. "Exactly like the press. Our fundamentals haven't degraded. Our product hasn't lost a single capability. What we have is a public relations problem, not a structural one." The board agreed to reconvene in a week. No resolution. No vote of confidence offered. As the call ended, the chairman kept his screen open. "I've watched you navigate crises for 11 years, he said quietly. "Data breaches, congressional investigations, hostile takeovers. I've never seen you like this." "Like what?" Travis asked. "Unarmored. Like a person instead of a strategy." Travis absorbed that. "I have 2 daughters who are 3 days old," he said. "They've recalibrated things." The chairman studied him through the screen. "Bring pictures next week. Even the hardest investors go soft around newborns." On the other side of the city, at Greenfield Medical, Kathryn was preparing to go home. Travis arrived with a bag from the restaurant near her apartment that she had mentioned once, months ago, in passing. She had not expected him. He had also called a postpartum support service without asking her first. He realized his mistake the moment he told her. "You arranged care for my children without asking me," she said, not loudly, but with the precise weight of someone who chooses words deliberately. "I did. I'm sorry. I'm used to fixing things. I see a problem and I move toward it." "We're not a problem to be fixed," Kathryn said. "And if we are going to figure out how to raise these girls together, you need to understand something foundational. I make the decisions about my life. Consultation is not optional. It's the minimum." Travis nodded. She was right. He knew she was right. He had not expected to love it this much. Not the exhaustion, though that was real and total, the kind that settled into the center of your bones after a night of 2-hour stretches. Not the uncertainty, which arrived fresh every morning with each new need he had no framework to address. He had not expected to love the sheer animal simplicity of it. Holding a baby who stops crying because she recognizes your voice. Watching 2 small faces organize themselves around early, uncertain smiles. Sitting in a rocking chair at 3 in the morning with a warm, sleeping weight against your chest and feeling, for the first time, that you are doing exactly what you are supposed to be doing. Travis Irvine had built a company that protected the digital infrastructure of governments. And nothing he had ever accomplished had prepared him for the staggering importance of keeping an infant's head supported. He came every day. Kathryn had set the terms clearly. Daily visits, participation in all feedings and care, no overnight presence. Not yet. Their relationship needed to be rebuilt around their daughters, not around whatever history still existed between them. He accepted this without argument, which surprised them both. He was not always good at it. He sometimes arrived with things he had ordered without asking. He occasionally defaulted to efficiency when patience was what the moment required. Kathryn corrected him without cruelty each time, and each time he adjusted. 3 weeks in, he was sitting in the rocking chair with one daughter. They had settled on the names Bria and Soleil, trying to determine whether her crying was hunger or discomfort when Kathryn appeared in the nursery doorway. "You look like a man who's been awake since Tuesday." He smiled without taking his eyes off the baby. "Work is complicated." "How bad?" "We've lost 4 contracts. The board is divided. 2 of Carver's Senate allies have launched an informal inquiry into our government partnership agreements." He adjusted his hold on Bria. "But the core technology is still the strongest in the industry. We'll survive." Kathryn studied him from the doorway. The man she was watching was not entirely the man she had known. The perfectly pressed suits had given way to clothes that could withstand being spit up on. The careful calculation that used to live in his eyes had been replaced by something more immediate, more present. "You've surprised me," she said. He looked up then. "I didn't expect you to actually be here. Not like this." "I've surprised myself," he said honestly. "I genuinely believed I didn't want this. Any of this. And now I cannot imagine a version of my life where I walked out of that hospital and kept going." She was quiet for a moment. Then she pushed off the doorframe and came to sit across from him. For the first time in months, the air between them was not entirely composed of caution. She arrived on a Tuesday evening without calling ahead. Travis saw her through the peephole first, and for a moment he simply stood in the hallway without moving. He had last seen Cecile Carver in photographs, a picture taken by a tabloid outside her father's Georgetown home, her expression hidden behind oversized sunglasses, her posture the rigid composure of a woman refusing to give anyone a photograph they could use against her. "She deserves this," he thought. "Whatever she needs to say." He opened the door. Cecile Carver looked nothing like the woman who had been photographed in bridal suites and on the covers of society magazines. She was in dark jeans and a plain gray coat. No jewelry. No visible effort at performance. Her face was unguarded in a way he had never seen it, and it was in that unguarding that he realized how much of their relationship had been 2 people performing for each other. "I'm not here for a scene," she said before he could speak. "I just need to understand something." He stepped aside and let her in. She did not sit. She stood in the center of the living room and looked at him the way she might review a proposal she had to make a decision about. Was it all a performance? Everything? Travis was quiet for a moment. He owed her the precision of honest language, not comfortable language. "No," he said finally. "It wasn't a lie. But it also wasn't complete. I think we both walked into that relationship with goals that had very little to do with love. We made sense on paper. We could have built something significant together. We could have," she agreed. Her voice was steady. "And you chose this instead." She gestured, loosely, at the apartment around her. "I didn't choose it by plan. I think that's the point." A silence. Then from the nursery, a small sound. Soleil, waking from a nap, her voice rising in the particular register that meant food. "Now, please." Kathryn's soothing response followed, low and unhurried. Cecile looked toward the hallway. "May I see them?" Travis blinked. She met his eyes with a steadiness that asked for nothing manipulative. He nodded and led her to the nursery doorway. Inside, Kathryn sat in the rocking chair with Soleil. Bria slept in her crib. Kathryn looked up at the doorway with a carefully composed expression. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," Cecile said quietly. "I only wanted to see them." Something passed between the two women, not warmth exactly, but a recognition. An acknowledgement of shared geography in a story neither of them had written. "This is Soleil," Kathryn said, nodding toward the baby in her arms. "And Bria, in the crib." Cecile stepped forward and looked down at the sleeping infant with an expression Travis had not expected, uncomplicated wonder. She straightened after a moment. "Thank you," she said to Kathryn. Then, turning to Travis at the door, "My father will keep pushing against your company. I've told him I won't be part of it. What happened between you and me is separate from business. It always should have been." She left without another word. Travis returned to the nursery. Kathryn was watching the door. "That was unexpected," she said quietly. "She's more than I gave her credit for," Travis said. "We both were performing so thoroughly that neither of us really saw the other." Kathryn looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out Soleil and he crossed the room to take her. 6 months passed. The twins had grown from trembling newborns into round-cheeked, wide-eyed infants who recognized faces and grabbed fingers and distributed their opinions about the world loudly and without apology. Bria had developed a personality of patient observation. She would study something for long minutes before committing to a response. Soleil was direct in all things, her wants announced immediately and with full conviction. Travis had moved into the same building as Kathryn, 2 floors up. It was practical. It was deliberate. And it was, he admitted to himself on most mornings, the best decision he had made in years. Pinnacle Shield had steadied. The contracts lost in the initial fallout had been replaced by 3 new ones secured on the strength of the company's encryption architecture. The board had approved a restructuring of senior leadership, creating more distributed decision-making that Travis had begun to champion publicly. He still worked hard. That had not changed. But hard work now had a gravitational center it had never had before. The double stroller and the pediatrician appointments and the bedtime routine that he participated in with the seriousness of a man who understands that some things cannot be delegated. On a mild Saturday in early spring, he and Kathryn took the twins to Ellison Park for the first time. They found a spot beneath a flowering tree, spread a blanket, and placed both girls on it. Bria immediately began studying a passing cloud. Soleil attempted to eat the blanket. "They've changed so much," Travis said, watching Soleil examine her own fist with deep suspicion. "Not just them," Kathryn said. He looked at her. "The old version of you would have taken 17 calls by now." His phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked the screen. His CFO. He silenced it without answering. "That might have been important," Kathryn observed. "It might have been," he agreed. "But nothing is more important than this right now." She was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, "I didn't expect this version of you. I prepared myself to co-parent with someone who would show up scheduled and emotionally managed. And instead you're here. Actually here." Before either of them could follow the thread further, his phone lit up again. Derek. 3rd call in 8 minutes. He stepped away to answer. It was bad. A sophisticated cyber attack had penetrated the outer systems of Pinnacle Shield's government client databases. The FBI had already called the Pentagon by morning. Travis looked back at the blanket where Kathryn was lifting Soleil overhead and making her laugh, and he felt the 2 halves of his life pulling in opposite directions. "Go," Kathryn said, reading his face before he reached her. "We'll be here." The simplicity of that promise carried him through the next 72 hours. 72 hours. That was how long it took to contain the breach, verify the extent of the damage, and begin the process of rebuilding client confidence. Travis slept in 3-hour increments on the couch in his office. He ate food that arrived in containers and was consumed cold. He chaired 14 calls, reviewed 43 technical reports, and personally contacted every affected client, not through intermediaries, but himself, directly, with full accountability. The attack had been sophisticated, but the quantum encryption architecture at Pinnacle Shield's core had held. Peripheral systems had been accessed. The protected interior had not been breached. Travis noted privately that the quantum protocol had been Kathryn's suggestion during a late-night conversation about European data sovereignty, roughly 3 years ago. He had implemented it against the advice of 2 board members who called it excessive. It had now saved the company from a catastrophic loss. On the third morning, sitting in his office at 4 a.m. with the city dark outside and a photograph of Bria and Soleil propped against his monitor, Travis understood something with a clarity that exhaustion sometimes makes possible. The way he had been running his company was no longer adequate. Not because he had failed, the crisis had been contained, but because he had done it by running on his own systems, past the point where any human being should be expected to carry a weight of this kind alone. He drafted a proposal that night. By 9 a.m., he was presenting it to the board. "I was in a park with my daughters when this attack began," he said. "I left them to come here because it was necessary. But that moment clarified something I've been circling for months." He distributed the document. "I'm recommending we create a Chief Operating Officer position to manage daily operations. I will remain as CEO with focus on strategy and innovation. But Pinnacle Shield has outgrown the model where one person carries everything. The breach showed us that. The quantum protocol that saved us came from outside my own perspective. That's the lesson." One board member noted that this was a significant shift for a man whose management philosophy had historically involved controlling every detail. "Yes," Travis said. "It is a significant shift. That's rather the point." The chairman studied him for a long moment. 6 months ago you wouldn't have proposed this. 6 months ago I didn't know what was actually irreplaceable. The board approved the proposal in principle. It was not unanimous. But it was enough. That evening, Travis drove to Kathryn's apartment with dinner from the Italian place 2 blocks from her building. She opened the door and looked at the bags in his hands with a small smile. "Crisis resolved?" "Contained," he corrected. "And it led to some things I should have seen sooner." They ate at her kitchen table after the girls were asleep, the baby monitor glowing on the counter. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythms, indifferent and continuous. "You're restructuring because of them," she said. "Not just because of the business logic." He considered this. "Both are true at once," he said. "I used to think those categories had to be separate." "Amani," he began, then caught himself. He had done that before. Reached for something more formal when simplicity was what the moment required. "Kathryn," he said instead. She looked up from her wine glass. "These 6 months have changed me more than the previous 34 years combined." He set his glass down. "Being a father to Bria and Soleil has done something to the way I see everything. What I'm willing to sacrifice. What I understand to be non-negotiable." She waited. "But it's not only them." He met her eyes. "It's watching you. As a mother. As the person you've become, or maybe always been, and I was too busy navigating my own blueprint to actually see. Being here, in this life you've built, has felt more like home than anything I've designed on my own." Kathryn set her own glass down. "What are you saying, Travis?" "I'm saying that I think I'm in love with you. Not the way I was before. That had passion in it but also so much performance. This is something else. Something I don't have a plan for, which is how I know it's real." The kitchen was quiet. The monitor registered a small sound, Soleil shifting, then silence again. Kathryn looked at him for a long time. "When I was pregnant," she said finally, "I was terrified. Not just of the practical realities. I was afraid that every time I looked at them I'd be reminded of someone who had decided they weren't worth his disruption." He did not defend himself. He let her words stand. "But something happened," she continued. "As they grew, as I felt them and watched them on every ultrasound screen, they became entirely their own people. Not half of anyone. Just themselves. And I fell in love with who they actually were." She reached across the small table and placed her hand over his. "Something similar has happened with you. The man sitting here isn't the man who told me to handle it. He's shaped by that person's experiences, yes. But he's different in the ways that actually matter." "And that man?" Travis asked quietly. "That man I think I'm falling in love with too." She held his gaze. "But Travis, we have Bria and Soleil to think about. If we try and it breaks, it complicates everything." "I know," he said. "Which is why I want us to be deliberate. To build something real based on who we are now." "Slowly." "Slowly," she agreed. Her fingers tightened around his. "And honestly. Complete honesty, especially when it's hard." He promised. And this time, he meant it with everything he had. That night, he did not return to his own apartment. He slept on her couch. In the early hours, Bria's voice came through the monitor, small and insistent, and he padded to the nursery before Kathryn could stir, lifting his daughter gently, carrying her to the kitchen to prepare a bottle. Kathryn found them there at 6 a.m. Travis in yesterday's shirt, Bria cradled against his chest, both of them quiet in the morning light. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed." He looked at her over the baby's head. "And if it's all right with you, I'd like to keep doing that. Not here necessarily, not yet. But in this life. In yours and theirs." Kathryn crossed the kitchen and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. Then one to Bria's forehead. "I think we'd all like that very much," she said. 1 year. That was how long it had taken for the pieces to settle into the shape of something real. Bria and Soleil were 18 months old and conducted their lives with the focused intensity of people who have determined that the world exists primarily for their investigation. Bria climbed. Everything, always, without hesitation. Soleil catalogued the world first and then decided whether to engage, a preference that resulted in more thoughtful conclusions and fewer bruises. Travis stood in the nursery of the brownstone they had chosen together, a 4-bedroom with a small garden in the back and enough space for the life they were building, adjusting the mobile above a third crib. The crib would be occupied in approximately 2 months. "Duh," Soleil announced from behind him, holding up a board book with the air of someone presenting evidence. "In a minute, sweetheart." Kathryn appeared in the doorway, one hand resting on the round of her belly, watching him with a particular expression she reserved for moments she found quietly remarkable. "You know the baby won't care if the mobile is perfectly centered." "I'll care," he said, stepping back to examine his work. She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind, her cheek against his back. "Who would have thought? A year ago." "Not me," he said honestly. "I had something else entirely planned." The path from co-parents to partners had been built with intention and without shortcuts. Actual dates with babysitters and reservations, conversations that lasted past midnight, a courtship conducted with the seriousness of people who understood exactly what was at stake. When he proposed, it had been in this very kitchen on a quiet evening with both girls asleep, a ring he had chosen not for its optics but because it looked like her, clean and honest and not trying to impress anyone. Pinnacle Shield had continued to grow. The COO he had brought in, a woman named Sandra Osei who had run operations for 2 other major cybersecurity firms, had transformed the company's internal structure in ways that made Travis wonder why he had waited so long. He still worked hard. He still cared deeply about what the company built and who it protected. But the hours had become hours instead of a consuming identity, and the space that opened up had been filled with something that consistently turned out to matter more. A crash from the hallway. Bria had scaled the bookcase and was launching paperbacks to the floor, one at a time, with the methodical satisfaction of someone testing gravity repeatedly. Kathryn moved to retrieve her. Travis watched them, his daughters and the woman he loved, in the house they had built together from the fragments of a plan that had shattered exactly when it needed to. He had once believed that a disrupted plan was a failure. He understood now that sometimes disruption is simply the better plan arriving without an appointment. When Kathryn returned with Bria on her hip, he crossed the room and took Soleil from the floor, lifting her up until she laughed. The four of them stood together in the nursery, sunlight through the window, the mobile turning slowly above the empty crib. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin with the words, "This is not what I planned." Travis Irvine knew that now. He was grateful for every unscheduled, unscripted, perfectly imperfect day of it. Hey lovers and billionaires, if you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends and family. Your support truly means a lot and helps our stories reach more hearts around the world. See you on the next story.